Kenyan Medical Association has confirmed that more people are still being treated with serious gunshot injuries, with 13 of them already pronounced dead. Simon Kigondu, president of the Kenyan Medical Association, said that the figure of 13 deaths was not the final number. Recent video on Wednesday showed moments some of the protesters were being helped and some still running with one of their hands on their buttocks, seemingly trying to ease themselves of the pains of the bullets. The video also showed that some of the protesters were shot on their buttocks with sounds of gunfire heard repeatedly in quick succession in a war-like situation. Crowd of protesters ran into the parliamentary building in Nairobi, Kenya on Tuesday, trying to stop the members of parliament from passing the controversial Finance Bill 2024 into law. The lawmakers went ahead and passed the bill on Tuesday and presented it to President William Ruto to sign it into law. The bill is yet to be signed into law as aggrieved Kenyans continued with the protest against the Finance Bill 2024 aimed to increase taxes in the country. The parliament passed the bill and escaped the anger of the protesters through underground tunnel after 195 members of the parliament voted in favor for the bill and 106 voted against the bill, with 3 of the total votes spoiled, according to eyewitnesses. For weeks, a lot of Kenyans took to the streets and called for the stoppage of the bill with hashtag Reject Finance Bill. Protests in Nairobi and other towns all over the country. A section of the parliament building was also set ablaze on Tuesday by the protesters, who appeared to be mostly young people in their youthful age, according to videos posted online by eyewitnesses. Kenyan activist Omar Obama, the half-sister of former US President Barack Obama, was among those tear-gassed during the protests outside the parliament building in Nairobi. Police opened fire on demonstrators trying to storm the legislature, resulting in at least 13 deaths, dozens of injuries, and sections of the parliament building being set ablaze as lawmakers passed a tax-raising bill. Omar Obama, interviewed by CNN, expressed her support for the young Kenyans demonstrating for their rights amidst the chaos. Angry crowd broke through police lines to storm parliament in the capital Nairobi before setting parts of it ablaze, according to Reuters International News Agency. In an address on Tuesday evening, President William Ruto said all means will be deployed to thwart any attempts by dangerous criminals to undermine the security and stability of our country, after he had deployed the military to quell the protests. There have also been unverified social media reports of dozens of people being shot dead by security officers overnight, as well as reports of deaths in other areas around the country where there were protests, according to local reports from Nairobi. Unconfirmed reports indicated that the ceremonial mess, symbolizing the authority of the legislature, was stolen after the protesters broke into the parliament building, setting parts of it ablaze before firefighters arrived and de-escalated the inferno. Former President Uhuru Kenyatta urged dialogue, saying Kenya's leaders should know that power and authority is donated to them by the people. Parts of Reuters report raids in cold doors. Police opened fire on demonstrators trying to storm Kenya's legislature on Tuesday, with protesters killed, dozens wounded, and sections of the parliament building set ablaze as lawmakers inside passed legislation to raise taxes. In chaotic scenes, protesters overwhelmed police and chased them away in an attempt to storm the parliament compound, with Citizen TV reporting protesters had managed to enter the Senate chamber earlier in the day. Police opened fire after tear gas and water cannon fell to disperse the crowds. A Reuters journalist counted the bodies of at least 5 protesters outside parliament. A paramedic, Vivian Achista, said at least 10 had been shot dead. Another paramedic, Richard Angumo, said more than 50 people had been wounded by gunfire. He was lifting 2 injured protesters into an ambulance outside parliament. Police eventually managed to drive the protesters from the building amid clouds of tear gas and the sound of gunfire. The lawmakers were evacuated through underground tunnels, local media reported. Internet services across the country also experienced severe disruptions during the police crackdown, Internet Monitor Netblocks said. Kenya's leading network operator Safaricom said 2 undersea cables were out of action, causing the outages. Protests and clashes also took place in several other cities and towns across the country, with many calling for President William Ruto to quit office as well as voicing their opposition to the tax rises. Parliament approved the finance bill, moving it through to a 3rd reading by lawmakers. The next step is for the legislation to be sent to the president for signing. He can send it back to parliament if he has any objections. The finance bill aims to raise an additional $2.7 billion in taxes as part of an effort to lighten the heavy debt load, with interest payments alone consuming 37% of annual revenue. Opposition leader Raila Odinga called for the finance bill to be immediately and unconditionally withdrawn to make way for dialogue. I am disturbed at the murders, arrests, detentions and surveillance being perpetrated by police on boys and girls who are only seeking to be held over taxation policies that are stealing both their present and future, he said in a statement. Tuesday's protests began in a festival-like atmosphere, but as crowds swelled, police fired tear gas in Nairobi's central business district and the poor neighborhood of Kibera. Protesters ducked for cover and threw stones at police lines. People clambered over police vehicles stalled in the downtown streets. Police also fired tear gas in Eldoret, Ruto's hometown in western Kenya, where crowds of protesters filled the streets and many businesses were closed for fear of violence. Clashes also broke out in the coastal city of Mombasa and demonstrations took place in Kisumu, on Lake Victoria, and Garissa in eastern Kenya, where police blocked the main road to Somalia's port of Kismayo. In Nairobi, people chanted, "Ruto must go," and crowds sang in Swahili, "All can be possible without Ruto." Music played from loudspeakers and protesters waved Kenyan flags and blew whistles in the few hours before the violence escalated, Reuters news report ends in quote. Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, has urged the Kenyan authorities to exercise restraint while dealing with citizens protesting over the finance bill. He also called on Kenyans to demonstrate peacefully to avoid confrontations with police officers. "I am deeply saddened by the reports of deaths and injuries, including of journalists and medical personnel, connected to protests and street demonstrations in Kenya. I urge the Kenyan authorities to exercise restraint and call for all demonstrations to take place peacefully," stated Guterres. His statement emerged after several people were killed when protesters stormed parliament buildings on Tuesday. Foreign Ministry of Uganda government issued a statement from Kampala in Uganda on the 26th of June 2024, stating that the newly renovated Uganda House was among the properties destroyed by the angry protesters on Tuesday. In a statement signed by the Permanent Secretary of the Uganda Foreign Ministry, Bajaya Vincent Wezwa, the government of Uganda thanked the Kenya Fire Department for their quick response in putting out the fire. Bajaya also stated in the press statement that none of the diplomatic or the consular staff were in the building as at the time the protesters set the Uganda House ablaze, adding that the diplomatic relationship between the republics of Kenya and Uganda remains solid. In the wake of protests in Kenya, on June 25, 2024, the protesters abandoned the principle of peaceful demonstrations and took the path of destruction of properties wherein the newly refurbished Uganda House, a commercial building located on Kenyatta Avenue in the Nairobi Central Business District, was vandalized and set ablaze, the Uganda Foreign Ministry said.
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.